idea, Sam. Maybe we can ditch the hedge somewhere while the credits are running. Mind if I drive?
Not if you don't mind me clawing at the dash and shrieking like a cheerleader.
Sam, is pronto a real word?
Goodbye, Sam and Max. I'll never forget all you've done here today.
One of the benefits of having travelling siblings that are older than you is that usually they come back with various gifts from around the world, or at least some interesting trinkets to show. I was very lucky to get introduced to Sam and Max in one of those very instances. Sam and Max's story that I read was something to do with the Philippines, where I remember that the comedy of the entire issue was something along the lines of the fact that the artist didn't know what the Philippines looked like, so that they just drew whatever, and there was like a volcano sacrifice that was going on and stuff. Aside from that, I remember a story involving a fish in a bowl that was on a human's body that was eventually pushed down the stairs by toddlers, I think, but I've never really gone back to revisit the Sam and Max comic. Now, when I was younger, I also knew that Sam and Max had a video game called Hit the Road, and if it hadn't have been for that exposure to those comics when I was younger, then I would have passed it by upon seeing it. When you see a cover that looks like this when you're younger, you automatically assume that it's kind of lame, or for children, and therefore lame because you're clearly so much better than them, even though you're in that similar age bracket. As a form of rebellion, I would have ignored this if not for the comic books. Sam and Max was extremely enjoyable and funny when I was younger, but I was never able to finish it. Coming back into the month of point-and-click adventure games, I was more than happy to play Sam and Max Hit the Road and try and finish it. Now, this game is amazing if only for the comedy alone. Once you see that opening sequence, you know what kind of game you're in for, and if comedy isn't really your kind of thing, like you're in for a more serious point-and-click adventure, then I don't know why you're with LucasArts in the first place, but I would have to ask you to steer clear of this. The plot here is pretty much a vehicle used to move gags along. Some of the zany things you'll be doing are bungee jumping from Mount Rushmore, getting a vegetable that looks like the naturalist John Muir. Your main investigation in Sam and Max Hit the Road is to find the now unfrozen Bigfoot called Bruno, and find where he has fled off to with Trixie the giraffe-necked girl. If you can solve this, then you will solve the crime and solve the game. You'll eventually come across a country singer called Conroy Bumpus who does do a musical number for you in the game, and you'll eventually go looking and find other Sasquatches. This game is very funny, and I find a lot of the comedy still lands today, but I also feel that that might be a fault of the game. For example, a lot of the solutions to many puzzles are jokes, and if you can't think like the joke, or if you can't figure out what the punchline is, then you'll be stuck. There are a lot of times in particular, like when I think of that long bunch of yarn, where you eventually have to use a fish magnet into a dead hand and then attach that to something so that you can have a hand that holds a magnet and then pull something out of this massive ball of yarn. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I don't really like, and there's a joke where you have to get caught by a fisherman inside of a large fish monument sort of deal, like, and you get taken away by a helicopter, with the only hint being made that, oh, there's a helicopter that dumps fresh fish on the top of this restaurant. And so you're like, well, I don't know how to get that, until you figure out, you know what, I can actually fit inside this fish statue. And once you do that, sure enough, you can get caught by a fisherman, and then the helicopter will come and pick you up and take you to the next area of the game. There's little scenarios like that where I was like walking around for ages and ages, and a lot of the game's time for me came from just not understanding what kind of punchline I need to go through in this game. That's not to say that that's the solution to every single problem, and there are still a couple of puzzles that require just more understandable answers and more, let's just say, logical approaches, but those couple of joke ones that you don't understand will leave you scratching your head, and then once you eventually figure them out, you won't feel any sense of satisfaction. I'd never finished Hit the Road because of those such circumstances, but I do remember it fondly. I really liked Max when I was a kid, and one of the things that kept the Sam and Max comic in my mind, despite reading so little of it, was the fact that I could draw Max. And so, obviously, being very young and able to draw a lot of stuff in free time, well, I'm not so much an artist anymore, as you can see from some of the channel stuff, but I was able to draw Max, and so that sort of kept him in my mind. So once I was playing this game, it was like, oh wow, they can actually make comic books into video games? When I was looking around for the answers to these puzzles, I got to use a lot of talking to everybody, and I got to investigate every item. And you're going to want to do this, and it's not going to be a chore to you because of the amazing lines that Sam and Max say. When Sam looks at something and then makes his own comment based on it, and then Max might interject something, it makes it all the worthwhile that even if you do figure out the solution to those puzzles, you kind of just want to go around and investigate everything and talk to everyone and do every kind of option on them just to see what they might have to say. And I really think that that works in its favor. So you don't really get a sense of satisfaction when you finish the game because the story just kind of ends. Once you figure out exactly what you need and just get a couple of items, then you just hand them in and there you go, problem solved. Now while you do get an amusing ending screen because of this, it doesn't really feel like you've accomplished anything, but rather sat through a 3-hour or so comedy. And while the Sam and Max game is fun, you kind of just wonder what you did, and you have to view it as a sense of not accomplishment but entertainment in order to get anything out of this. Sam & Max is a very fun game, and I feel like the comedy is the only reason to play this. If you don't finish this game, you'll have the exact same amount of enjoyment as someone that does, because the payoff to the story is kind of weak, but getting there and having all the little quips and all the gags happen along the way are the more memorable things. While there's a couple of puzzles that are very difficult to try and understand logically, some of those puzzles' payoff are amusing in themselves when you figure out how weird and zany they can be. That being said, it does also hurt you when that happens, because you wonder, well, how was I supposed to know this? All in all, this game isn't the best, but by no means is it a bad experience. In fact, Sam & Max Hit the Road inspired me to go out and try and see if I can find more of that comic and try and reread it. And I saw that Sam & Max Save the World is available on Xbox and Steam, so I might go and pick that up eventually. But that's all I have to say about Sam & Max Hit the Road. A great game. Just don't take it too seriously, and just kind of stop playing at any time if you feel like it, because there's no real point to finishing. You'll just have as much fun, and hopefully that won't leave you with a little bit of anger at not understanding some of the puzzles or some of the progression. I'm the Nerd Pilgrim, and thank you guys for listening.